I suppose like all my work, I like to not have it just represent one thing, but more sort of a mishmash of meanings, so people can sort of take their own meanings out of it.
I'm Richard Quinn. I'm a first year master's student here, and I'm just going to talk to you quickly about my work. So I'll start you off with this idea of, this was a ritual that kind of started my work rolling. It was the idea of the Celtic headhunter. I'm usually influenced by mythology. I suppose history kind of comes along sort of hand in hand with that. One of the things that really influenced my work as well was the idea of buildings, and this came from a personal story. Before I started in fourth year and third year, I was living in a house with three guys. I was working about 5 days a week, as well as being here full time. My girlfriend had dumped me just as I moved in, and the place I was living was a disaster. It was just mold and disgusting. It was horrible. And over time, the stress started to build up. I wasn't looking after myself, drinking too much to deal with stress, this kind of thing. And I started to go into a very bad depression and suffering anxiety attacks and all this kind of thing. And one particular night, I started to have, and the thing was that the anxiety attacks used to get triggered off inside the house. It was always when I was in there, And when I went into the house, the anxiety started to happen again. My heart started to beat that little bit faster. And as I went up the stairs, it just started kind of picking up. And as I went, I was staying up in the attic. That was where I was living. And as soon as I started to get kind of halfway up the attic stairs, my heart started to beat so fast. I physically felt I had to turn around and come down. I literally felt I was going to just jump out of my chest. And that was one of the things that sort of made me kind of impacted a lot of my work. And it's where buildings come in a lot. And this is a good example of where that story comes in. This is a piece called Horse and Cart, where it was kind of a sort of a building on a cart being drawn by this kind of monster creature. And the idea of the piece is that the idea of a home can just become a burden. I felt that I experienced this a bit in my youth, and for that example as well. That sometimes a home's supposed to be a safe place, and sometimes it can feel like it's sort of shackled to you, like you're tied to it, and there's no way to escape it. And that's what this piece was about. This was a piece called Balance, where it's two figures standing on the shoulders. This was kind of a self-representation. And the two figures were the idea of one figure is kind of surrounded by the building, burden in the building kind of, building up around it, and the other figure crumbling down. And it was the kind of idea of having two figures in my life, one that created the burden and one that seemed to take it away. And everybody, I'd say, probably has that kind of thing, and usually, if you're lucky, your life finds a bit of a balance. This was a piece called The Watcher. It's kind of my outlook on the idea of depression, that even though I felt that when I was making this piece, I'd sort of gotten over that part of my life, it was still one of these things that kind of leered in the background. It was always kind of ever present. One sort of weird step and one bad step, and it was kind of watching over your shoulder. So this was a two-part piece. It was called The Devil in Me Is Not Me, He Said, and The Devil in Me Is Not Me, She Said. This was about a relationship that I had, probably the first sort of real love in my life, and it was the idea that both of us, the relationship inevitably failed, and it wasn't because we didn't love each other. It was because we were both too afraid to come out from under that mask. We both let sort of pride and insecurity and just our flawed natures get in the way of it, and that's what this piece is about. The devil in me is not me, And this is my last piece, Pagan. It's called. I sort of snuck a lot of small things into this piece, so it's free for interpretation. But I'll tell you some of what I wanted to be about. First of all, I wanted to have a feel of sort of ritual about it. Kind of like it was something almost of a backward time. The skulls are a sort of representation of the balance between life and death. It's the living in the the living figures holding the sort of dead skulls and kind of covering themselves with it. But the main figure that jumps out is the figure in the front, and she's the one who's holding the skull most of the way. And that's what the piece is about. It's about sort of honesty, To quote was it Henry David Thoreau, rather than love than money and fame, give me truth. And that's what I think is the most important thing, is just to be. I think honesty is the most important thing in life, to accept that we're all flawed, we're all imperfect, And if we can accept that in ourselves and in everybody else, I think that's the most important thing.